Continuing debate, the honourable member for Souris, Moose Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's good to see you here today. I'm happy to have a chance to contribute today, taking part in this discussion. It is always an honour for me to stand and speak on behalf of the great people of Souris Moose Mountain. If I might, I would like to take a quick moment to give a shout out to my 5-year-old granddaughter Zella, who is beautiful and brilliant, just like her mother Catherine, my daughter, and her grandmother Donna, my wife. I'd also like to shout out for my 2-year-old grandson Porter and my 16-month-old twins grandsons Kason and Atlas. Mr. Speaker, the reason I bring that up is that not only are these people very important to me, but these particular children, like all children in Canada, are the main reason why I do what I do. I love them with all my heart. However, I worry about their financial futures after 9 years of this government's reckless spending. The Liberal Green Slush Fund that we are talking about here today is a prime example of just that. As I stated, I appreciate this opportunity to add my voice to the debate that we're having here in this House today, and which we are already been having for a number of weeks. I have listened to many speeches delivered by my colleagues on this issue, and I admire the perseverance that has been shown to making sure that this government is held accountable for their failure to produce the documents that were ordered by this House. It is shameful we aren't able to move on to other business simply because the Liberals refuse to follow the rules. But this is also something we have sadly come to expect after the last 9 years of this Prime Minister. One of my colleagues tallied up the number of scandals that have occurred under this government, and he came up with approximately 68, an alarming number to say the least. If we look at it in another way, that means that these Liberals are dealing with a new scandal about every 2 months. Some, like myself, might wonder how this is even possible, especially since the Liberals got into power by claiming to be the most transparent and accountable party out there. Now, Mr. Speaker, Spanish philosopher George Santayana is attributed for saying, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." I find it very ironic given today's discussion. In fact, in October 2013, the Prime Minister himself tweeted 6 months after becoming the leader of the Liberals that, and I quote, "It's hard not to feel disappointed in your government when every day there is a new scandal," end quote. What does this say about this Prime Minister? Scandal after scandal after scandal. We on this side of the House have been dealing with this exact problem for nearly a decade now. And in this particular instance, it's costing the taxpayer an eye-watering $400 million. This is not the kind of governance that I wanted for my country, and I know that the majority of Canadians are also sick and tired of the Liberals' repeated failures and complete inability to manage public funds. I'd like to remind all members that the seats that we are sitting in do not belong to us. They belong to the people, the taxpayers, who put their faith in us to represent their best interests and to make their lives better in whatever way we can. The people voted for us because they trusted our ability to govern honestly and openly, and that's something that I personally hold very sacred. Watching the Liberals flout the rules of this institution by refusing to comply with the House order to produce documents is offensive, not just to me, but to all Canadians. It is a slap in the face of democracy, and it insults the very people who put MPs in this position of privilege, here in this House of Commons chamber in the very first place. Mr. Speaker, the overarching theme that appears to encompass this Prime Minister's time in office over the last 9 years is rules for thee, but not for me. What the public sees with this government is hypocrisy at every turn. How are Canadians meant to trust a government when its leaders continually says one thing but does another? The Prime Minister tells Canadians they need to cut down their emissions. And what does he do? He flies in a private jet, taking dozens of trips a month, and likely has one of the largest carbon footprints of anyone in this country. The Prime Minister said the budget will balance itself, yet it has now spent more than the past 9 years than all other previous Prime Ministers combined. The Prime Minister said that he would maintain an open and transparent government, when he got elected. Yet the second the We Charity scandal hit the headlines, he prorogued Parliament to avoid accountability. Time and time again, the Liberals fail to practice what they've preached, and they refuse to be held accountable for these failings. The fact of the matter is that the rules of this place and now its functions are written out in black and white. I believe all MPs have a copy of Bosch and Gagne's practice and procedures in their office, and this information is also available on the internet. We can all access it on our computers or on our phones, so there's really no reason why these procedures wouldn't and couldn't be followed when they are so clear and readily available. When it comes to the right to order for the production of documents, Bosch and Gagnon, 3rd edition, 2017, states the following on pages 984 to 986. The standing orders do not delimit the power to order the production of papers and records. The result is a broad, absolute power that on the surface appears to be without restriction. There is no limit on the types of papers likely to be requested. The only prerequisite is that the papers exist in hard copy or electronic format and that they are located in Canada. It continues on to say, no statute or practice diminishes the fullness of that power rooted in House privileges unless there is an explicit legal provision to that effect, or unless the House adopts a specific resolution limiting the power. The House has never set a limit on this power to order the production of papers and records." End quote. This is not the first time that this section of the Practice and Procedures Manual has been quoted during this particular debate. And that's because it's so essential to how our country's government functions, or doesn't function in this case. The House of Commons has, without question, the right to order papers to be produced by the government, and it has done so in the appropriate way, by following the appropriate rules. The Liberals have failed to do their jobs and have broken those rules, yet again showcasing their disregard for the institution of Parliament and eroding public trust at the same time. Mr. Speaker, one of the roles that have been very fortunate to have had during my time as Member of Parliament was to be the chair of the Standing Committee of Government Operations and Estimates, otherwise known as OGO. I took that job very seriously because I knew that there was great trust being put in me to uphold the rules and to follow the procedures that have been set out and established by my predecessors and my followers. This was the job I was given, and I like to think that I did it well and to the best of my ability. It wasn't difficult for me to follow the rules, Mr. Speaker. I had some incredible support from the House of Commons committee staff, including the clerk and the analysts, so there was no reason why I was unable to follow the letter of the law with their help and guidance. We have the same support here in the House of Commons, and I thank all the clerks and all the experts in this place who work so hard to make sure we can do our jobs properly for Canadians. With all of these great minds coming together, as well as the ease of access to how now with the technology that we have, one would think that it would be easy to know and comply with the rules of Parliament. Yet the Liberals still can't seem to figure it out. Canadians expect that at the very least, their elected officials are the type of people who follow the rules and respect the institution of Parliament. This is why they elected us, and upholding these rules and institutions is one of the most basic functions of this role. What Canadians don't want to see are members of the Parliament who are stalling the business of this country because they are desperately trying to cover up their $400 million scandal. But that's exactly what's happening when they turn into CPAC these days. It's a disappointing yet not surprising that the Liberals are doing anything they can to dodge accountability for their mistakes. Mr. Speaker, what must be in these documents that they do not want Canadians to see? Begs to make us wonder. Mr. Speaker, as you know, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, also known as SDTC, is the organization that has been the centre of our debate since September. The initial purpose of SDTC was to outlined on their website is as follows, and I quote, SDTC finances and supports the development and demonstration of clean technologies which provide solutions on issues of climate change, clean air, water quality, and soil, and which deliver economic, environmental, and health benefits to Canadians. As someone who represents a riding that has been a world leader in developing the utilization of carbon capture and sequestration technology, otherwise known as CCUS, I know firsthand how important it is to ensure that the funding that is meant for this purpose goes to the right people and the right places. Thanks to investments made by the previous Conservative government, the CCUS facility at Boundary Dam Power Plant in my hometown of Estevan, Saskatchewan, has now been in operation for 10 years. As of the end of 2023, this facility has captured a total of over 5.8 million tons of CO2 since 2014 and prevented it from entering our atmosphere and sequestered it 2 kilometers underground. This is exactly the kind of project that SDTC was meant to facilitate. And it is clear that when taxpayers' funds are handled by a competent government, it creates an environment where innovation and development can flourish. We've seen it before, and under the next Conservative government, I know we will see it again. Sadly, the reason why we are not having this debate today is because taxpayer funds at SDTC were abused to the tune of that whopping $400 million, not a penny of which has been paid back. Money was given by directors to companies that they had huge conflicts of interest with, companies that they were affiliated and stood to gain from. Mr. Speaker, I come from a rural riding that has historically relied on the development of this country's abundant natural resources. The biggest industries in my constituency are agriculture and energy. And I can tell you right now that farmers are some of the best, most educated environmentalists and stewards of the land that you'll ever encounter. The innovation and ideas that our agriculture producers have had and continue to have to reduce emissions, improve soil quality, and so much more, all while producing some of the best crops in the world, is astounding. I can only imagine what these producers could have done with the $400 million that this government misappropriated through SDTC. And they should be ashamed of themselves by trying to cover up such a gross and egregious misuse of taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Speaker, where did that money go? And in whose pockets? One might ask that question. Now, I would like to focus on that figure for a moment, because I think that the amount of $400 million is difficult for the average person to really visualize. In times past, families, governments would count their nickels and dimes, and over time, that was turned into dollars and cents, and then into hundreds and thousands, and then into millions and billions. And now it will, if we look at the national debt, with this government, we are counting trillions, with families are still trying to keep up with the nickels and dimes. The Liberals have upped the ante in all of the worst ways. Too much scandal coupled with too much spending, and Canadians have had enough. When this Liberal leader became Prime Minister, the national debt was just over $612 billion. And today, 9 years later, it has doubled to over $1.2 trillion. As mentioned, he has spent more in this time frame than all other previous prime ministers combined. As I stated before, I can only imagine the difference that $400 million would have made to the people in my riding if that money had been spent responsibly and constructively instead of being used for our Liberal Green slush fund. I know the town of Cornack, which has been absolutely devastated by this government's so-called just transition, would have benefited massively with just a small chunk of that money. They stand to lose up to 67% of the town's population by 2030 because this government's policies and lack of support over the last 9 years. Their local representatives have pleaded with the Liberals for more funding and more boots-on-the-ground assistance, but they have been virtually getting nothing. They have even come all the way to Ottawa on multiple occasions to state their case before this government and the other House about the need for greater support from their government. Instead of getting funding that might save their country, what do the people of Cornack see? They see rich Liberals getting even richer through corrupt and illegal means. They see a government that refuses to be accountable to the people who elected it. They see $400 million going to people who did nothing to earn it but to rub shoulders with the right people in the right places. The system was blatantly abused, and the attempt to cover up this abuse by refusing to produce the ordered documents is almost just as bad. Mr. Speaker, according to the Auditor General's report, there were 186 conflicts of interest in the grants that were delivered by SDTC, amounting to roughly $334 million that was given to projects in which board members of SDTC had a conflict of interest. And for those following at home, such that the numbers add up, there was $58 million given to projects where their terms were not even insured. These board members, I will remind you, were appointed by the Prime Minister and by Mr. Baines, the then Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. They handpicked these individuals and approved them for this job. These board members then felt it was appropriate to make funding decisions that benefited themselves. This is extremely concerning, and I will expand a little on why that is. Excuse me for a second. Mr. Speaker, since I became an MP in 2015, one of my biggest gripes with this government is their unwavering devotion to creating unnecessary bureaucracy. Unfortunately, this Prime Minister seems to love nothing more than hiring a board of people to consult on every issue under the sun. And he has no problem whatsoever with billing the taxpayer for it. The Liberals create these boards, and they pay the members to consult, hold meetings, write reports, and in many cases there is almost no concrete benefit to show for it, and little to no accountability for these board members. These people are paid with taxpayers' dollars. By the taxpayer, I mean the hardworking Canadians who go out to do a job and get paid for their work. These people then pay taxes on that income. That is how governments make money. This government likes to take the money from them to pay bureaucracies rather than by using it to benefit the very people who work for it. My worry is this: if the board of SDTC was able to waste and abuse $400 million of taxpayer dollars so flippantly, how many other boards appointed by this government are doing the same? Are we just starting to scratch the surface, or only just beginning to really see the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how deep this scandal might truly run? And as we know, an iceberg is always bigger under the water than what is seen on the surface. Oftentimes, the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, the Liberals won't even give the authorities the chance to determine how bad the crime really is. We know it's bad. The famous Liberal sponsorship scandal that brought down the government of the time was about $40 million. And this is 10 times that amount. As I mentioned before, it is a number so high that most struggle to really conceptualize it, including myself. Mr. Speaker, the $400 million scandal we are debating here today is not the Prime Minister's first. Far from it. In fact, I am sure that we all remember the We Charity scandal, which was a whopping $600 million that the Prime Minister gave to his friends and Liberal insiders. We obviously didn't learn his lesson then, and we're likely he won't learn anything from this situation either. We also had the ArriveCan app, otherwise known as Arrive Scam, since it cost the taxpayers $56 million for something that could have been created for a few $1,000s. I'm sure my constituents who can't afford groceries would have loved a piece of that wasted $56 million, but I digress. There was also the SNC-Lavalin scandal, where the Prime Minister unethically and inappropriately interfered with our country's justice system by pressuring one of the cabinet pressuring one of the cabinet ministers to do something against her greater judgment. That's a prime example of how he has absolutely zero regard for the rule of law of this country, and shows that he truly does not believe that he can do whatever, or believes that he can do whatever he wants without consequences. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'd like to wrap up my remarks by reminding my colleagues that Remembrance Day is soon approaching. As the son of a veteran, as someone who was raised to have the utmost respect for the men and women who have fought for this country, we need a government that does better. Our veterans fought for you and I to be able to live peacefully and safely in this country that upholds the rule of law above all else. And the least we can do as parliamentarians is reflect that value here in this House. I call on the Prime Minister and his Liberals to stop the cover-up, produce the documents so that we can get back to work that truly matters. Or better yet, just call a carbon tax election.